Good morning, Matthew and Liz, and everybody tuning in today. I'm really excited for this conversation because some of my favorite experiences involving beer also involve food, and both of you have businesses that involve both. But when you started your breweries, they did not initially have food. So I'm really curious to dive into the inner workings of, what made you one decide to start without food, then what kind of resulted in the process of you deciding to add it in. So Matthew, because you are to the right of me, I'd love for you to introduce yourself to everybody. Tell them a little bit about what you do.
Yeah, thank you for the introduction, Andrew, and very much appreciate you putting this together to have this conversation to help share, a little bit of our trials and tribulations of what we've gone through as far as our experiences and needs and growth for adding a component like food, to our brewery business. So in general, back up. So again, Matthew Dom, Masteries Brewing Co. We are located out on St. Pete Beach, Florida. If anybody's paid attention to TripAdvisor lately, and I definitely like it better than Yelp. St. Pete Beach was just voted #1 beach in the U.S. So I kind of have to throw that plug in there real quickly. So if you're looking for a beautiful destination to come visit a brewery, you can't really get any better than St. Pete Beach right now. So with that being said, so we've been out on St. Pete Beach for a little over 4 years, and yes, like many, we started out as a straight brewery with no food, and today we operate food in a kitchen 7 days a week. So definitely a lot of changes. Andrew, I don't know how much you want me to go further along at the
No,
moment
that's
with
fantastic to begin with, Matt. Now, I know you said you had an interesting background prior to the brewing world. What did you do before you opened your brewery?
Yeah, so I'm a mechanical engineer, mechanical contractor by trade. So, I've spent the last 15 plus years prior to getting into the beer industry developing, designing, working around the hospitality and manufacturing industry for process cooling. So all the stuff that we use chillers for in the beer world, working with pumps and control systems for that, as well as scissors, things on the many a thousand a square feet, type size. A lot of produce facilities, meat packing places that begin using walk-in coolers for the excess size of 10,000 square feet. So getting into craft beer, really, I came in through a different realm than most, where many of the local craft beer guys in the Tampa Bay area started out being my friends through first being my customers, and then getting very much immersed into what they had going on, loving the community, loving the networking, loving just everything about the collaborative efforts that individuals in the craft beer world had. Where as you can imagine, coming from an engineering contracting world, it's very cutthroat and very competitive. So seeing that collaborative efforts was a huge draw for me. On top of it, big craft beer fan, and I finally said, you know what, it's time for me to just jump in and do this. And through it, I've been able to be a big asset for a lot of other craft breweries, as well as just find a lot of great friendships that really made the day-to-day work less of a job and more of a lifestyle of what it is I love to do.
Absolutely. You couldn't have said it better. And do you still run your other company?
I do. Yep. So I'm pretty 50-50 between the two, and that's not like 20 hours in one spot and 20 hours a week in the other. It's more like 60 hours doing one and 60 hours doing the other. And on top of that, being a new dad to an almost 2-year-old, and definitely working hard that work-life balance.
Well, Matthew, it's a pleasure to have you today. I can only imagine how busy you are, so I appreciate you coming to hang out with us for a minute. Now, Brian, welcome. We're going to go to you in a minute, but Liz was here next. So, Liz, it's a pleasure to have you again. I know Matthew just mentioned that he recently had a child, so I have a small one as well. Congratulations, Matthew. And Liz, you were on a panel with me previously about running a brewery while also raising a family, which you're busy yourself. So tell everybody a little bit more about what you do in addition to, running a brewery, having a family, just a little more background.
Sure. So I'm Elizabeth Jacobs with Legacy Ale Works. We're located in Jacksonville, Florida. We've been open just a little over 2 years now. And I pretty much just spend my days just running the brewery and trying to run this house a little bit. Some days one leads and the other one follows, and the other way, sometimes it's the other way around. But you mentioned what got us into, I guess, originally not opening with food. in looking at the area that we were going to open and the final location that we picked, there were a lot of great restaurants and stuff located really within the proximity of our location. We were located in a portion of a strip mall that had everything from barbecue, Chinese to Mexican. And so we realized that we just wanted to kind of partner with those existing businesses to kind of supply our food needs. And then also be able to really just kind of focus on just making the beer well. So we didn't want to spread ourselves too thin on our resources, especially right out the gate. So it was a decision that, we thought would eventually come, but, just weren't planning on doing it when we actually did.
And how far into your operation did you decide to add your own food options?
Well, unfortunately, that was kind of pushed on us. When we had our first anniversary, we kind of started having the discussions. We knew that food was going to be the next step for us. We just weren't ready. And then throughout the various COVID shutdowns that took place in Florida, the one that occurred over the summer required any establishments that didn't have food service to shut down. And they defined food service as the actual food license, not as the partnership that we had at that point. And so we had to actually, as many of the other breweries in Florida did, ran out, scrambled to go grab some hot dog warmers and a food license so that we could, open our doors again. And so that kind of is what prompted us to kind of jump into it. And then once we were there, I said, we might as well just go all in and figure out how to make this actually make us some money. And so that's when we decided to really kind of do that endeavor.
Awesome. Excited to learn more about that shortly. And Brian, thanks for waking up early for us. I know you're all the way out there on the West Coast.
Yeah, no problem. Happy to be here.
Did I wake you up?
No, but I am brewing later today, so it's going to be a little longer day today.
Exciting. Well, tell everybody a little bit about who you are and what you do.
Yeah, so my name is Brian Avery. I'm one of the co-owners and the director of brewing operations at Brewery Brewing Company. We're in Lancaster, California, which is basically northernmost Los Angeles County. We are going to be turning 9 years old in July and just went live with our new pizza kitchen a few weeks ago. Kind of like Liz was saying, it wasn't really in the original business plan, and it was definitely something that COVID kind of pushed us into. But yeah, almost 10 years of just being a packaging production brewery and starting really, really small. We started on a 3-barrel brew house, and then about 5 years ago graduated to a 15-barrel brew house. And last year jumped up to a much more significant canning line. So yeah, basically making the big pivot like you guys from production brewery into Brewpub now.
Very excited to hear about how it's going. I'm sure you have some good stories from the first couple of weeks.
Yeah.
Learning a ton, I can only imagine. But I have a weird question for you three. Each of you started a brewery, and this question wasn't planned until about 30 seconds ago. You each started a brewery that begins with the same first letter as your first name. Was this intentional? Matthew?
Yeah, so you know what? So Masters is actually a family name to begin with. So, my great-grandparents came to the St. Pete, Tampa Bay area back in the 1890s. And there's a lot of businesses throughout the St. Pete area that are all family. Again, my cousins have been, that own that are all named Mastery. So it is kind of ironic, that it has an M as well, but kind of worked out really good as I also sport a tattoo of our logo of the Mastery's M with the filigree and hop around it. So, when I wear that on the shoulder, I mean, some days it's Matt, some days it's Mastery, and if mom ever asks, it's for mom.
Nice. And Liz and Brian, you don't need to answer that question. That one was just for fun. But I would like to learn a little bit more about the three of your backgrounds. I know, Matthew, you had mentioned that you had a little bit of interaction in the hospitality world prior. But, Liz, let's start with you on this one. But prior to opening your brewery, do you have any background in the hospitality or serving industries?
Very little. I mean, probably close to 20 years ago, and I'm dating myself when I say that, but yeah, about 20 years ago, I worked at a pub, and other than that, I have not been in the industry a lot. So I really been going into food service and that aspect. I really had to lean on some resources from other professionals in the industry, and I have a lot of great friends that are all in different aspects of the hospitality industry, so I was able to lean on them for that.
So outside of maybe cooking at your own home, you didn't have a lot of professional cooking experience, safe to say, or running a kitchen experience.
Right.
Brian, how about yourself? You just opened, did you say a pizza kitchen?
Yeah. Kind of like Liz, no real background as far as that goes. I went to school for film studies, and after graduating college, worked on film and television sets for a few years. But all the while was home brewing. And so just like most of the, small craft brewers in this country, it's all traced back to homebrew roots and then making the jump to go professional. Never worked in a restaurant. I did work in some breweries and some brew pubs before opening Brewery, but nothing that I would really chalk up to real previous experience.
And Matthew, welcome back. You had mentioned that you had a little bit of background in the hospitality industry, but did you actually have any hands-on experience in like a kitchen or anything of sorts like that, where you're actually prepping food ready for the public?
Yeah, so to be honest, other than a lot of cooking with my grandmother in my younger days, I had no formal experience working inside the hospitality industry. I'd never been a bartender or a server. I never worked in back house operations. So, jumping into the hospitality world, other than, again, being a great consumer, in my opinion, in the past, had no formal experience of working in it. Everything that I came from was really, again, engineering, contracting, project management, business strategy and planning. Definitely getting into the hospitality world was really the biggest change and learning lesson for me. More so just, again, better understanding the culture of it.
Interesting. Now I'm going to start throwing out some questions for you all about your experiences, adding food and the whole processes that went along with it. Anyone at any point, feel free to jump in. The first thing I'm very curious about is, why did you choose to avoid having food in the first place? Because I don't know about you, but when I go and I'm drinking, I like to have food as well. So why did you specifically choose not to have food, Liz?
I think food service is just a very, it's a complicated beast all on its own. It has its own learning curve. It has its own ups and downs. There's a lot to navigate and figure out. So I felt that with us going and opening the brewery, we really needed to focus on our primary product, which was the beer. And our fear was, if we jumped into food service right away, that we would risk, having a lesser quality product when it comes to our main product, which was the beer. So it was a very conscious decision that we did that. And then, of course, there's build out costs, and there's, all those startup costs that go with opening that kind of operation from the get-go too. So it was a great way to kind of be able to open with just taking kind of a small bite in build out and experience, and then be able to build on that.
As part of your initial business plan, did you have any notes in there where you may open a kitchen later on?
Yeah, there was definitely, as a matter of fact, we even designed the space so that we could outfit a future kitchen. So we did some mindful things where electricity was concerned and that sort of thing, kind of keeping that in mind. That was kind of more leaning towards the 5-year plan than the 1.5-year mark. But at this point, we're glad we've jumped in, and now we're looking at, the next step for us.
Exciting. No, Matthew, how about you? When you first opened the brewery, did you have any plans at all to add food, or why did you avoid it to begin with?
Yeah, so in the very beginning, it's really more so for us of kind of where the current stance or nature of Florida was with craft beer and the natural separation that was almost created early on of a distinguished standalone brewery versus the Brewpub model. When you look back in the 2014 to 2016 era, when we were first, getting our our feet wet in craft beer. There were really only a handful of breweries throughout the entire state of Florida that even had a food and beer component, especially here in the St. Pete, Tampa Bay area. I mean, you had Dunedin Brewery, and then you had Tampa Bay Brewing Company that had, again, great brew pub models. But then you start thinking about the cluster of breweries that started opening up in St. Petersburg, which were close to our home base. Green Bench Brewing Company, Three Daughters, St. Pete, Cycle Brewing, being in the downtown area. We just again we're looking at it. It didn't seem like it was needed to be a fit at the time. So even when we're designing our business model, looking at our layout, picking a building for our brewery, again at the time it didn't seem necessary, because it seemed like you could run a separate operation of just being a brewery producing great beer, and that there was more than enough other hospitality and food options for customers to be able to have, again, the food truck model. So at the time, it just didn't seem like to be a need in the area.
No, thanks for sharing all that. How about you, Brian? When did you start to even think about food, and why did you avoid it in the first place? Oh, I hate to tell you, Brian, but you're on mute.
We didn't get serious about it until about 10 months ago. And it was direct response to COVID mandates. When we first opened, it wasn't even remotely in our plan, largely because we started on a shoestring budget, and not just the initial capital investment into a kitchen, but also thinking of employees. And when we first started, I would brew all the beer, wash kegs, wash tanks, and then bartend on the weekends. And so it was kind of a one-man act for the first 6 months until we had to hire our first employee. Mm-hmm. And with our pizza kitchen, we had to onboard 16 people simultaneously. And so pretty significant jump up, and definitely not something I would have had the courage to do without having any kind of established brand or, it's so much easier to turn on a kitchen after you have a 9-year track record in your community versus hoping that all of it's going to play off at the same time out the gate.
That's a really interesting point. And for everybody here today, what was the current food scene like in your areas? Liz, I know you had mentioned you had neighboring restaurants that already had great products. Was there food trucks already out there visiting local breweries that you could rely on to provide food for your guests if needed? What was the current landscape like in each of your locations?
So Jacksonville is great and is a great food truck city. So yeah, a lot of the breweries do utilize food trucks and things like that for food options. Our particular location, our lease actually prohibited having a food truck on site so that it wouldn't compete with the restaurants in the plaza. But we had so many options just within a few steps of our front door that it wasn't an issue. So that part was pretty seamless. But I do know that as we were approaching opening, I did notice a trend as far as consumer expectations was to have food available at the location. It was getting harder and harder to be able to open a location and just expect people to bring their food with them. And so now you had to start calling, around first to see if that brewery had food or not before showing up. And so it was definitely in a place of transition where the expectations started shifting to where now people expected there to be some type of food option, either available on site or within a very, reasonable proximity.
Now, you mentioned it was a pretty streamlined process between your neighboring restaurants. How did that work? Did they, have to call the restaurant and then it get delivered over? Did they have to go over and pick it up themselves? What was that process like for most of your neighbors?
So when we first opened, they could order directly from the restaurant, and then the restaurant would deliver it over without any issue. After we were open a few months, we actually selected one of those restaurants to have kind of an exclusive partnership. And so we offered a limited menu from that restaurant in our location. So you could actually go through our POS, add it to your tab. We would call the order in, it would get delivered over. So the customer would only have one seamless transaction. And then we would settle with that business at the end of the week every week for whatever orders we had that week.
How did that relationship work out?
Oh, it was wonderful. Even after the first shutdown, after we reopened from the first shutdown, having the documented food sales kind of allowed us to open back up a little bit earlier than some of the other area breweries that didn't necessarily have documented food service. And then obviously during the second shutdown, that all changed when they really defined what they meant by food service. But it was a great transaction. Our customers loved it. They loved being able to order directly from us, directly from having it on one tab. Sometimes they commented saying they would have liked to have had the full menu available, but we felt that it was something that would be a lot easier for us to manage if we had just like the most popular items available. But we still at that point had allowed people to bring in outside food as well. We weren't restricting them at that point.
Can you talk a little bit more for a moment about the licenses that Florida required breweries and what they required of you to have food at that point in time?
Yeah. So initially when we opened, you're required to have a license for manufacturing the beverage, and then you have a 2COP, which allows what allows you to serve the beer through your tap room. There was no food component required other than just a health certificate that you had to obtain. Once the first shutdown happened and we reopened from that, the emergency order from the governor basically stated that you had to have some type of food service, and that food service could have meant having a food truck on site or something along those lines, as long as you just had food available at your location. And then going into the second shutdown, they specifically outlined the Series 500 license that you had to have, which was either the seated restaurant license. I believe there's a catering license, and then there's a license that's for smaller establishments that are more like cash and carry to go options. So they got very specific during the second shutdown as far as what requirement they wanted regarding food.
I remember seeing quite a bit of posts and crappy professionals from Florida breweries trying to figure out the current landscape and trying to make it work. So big props to you for navigating that messy situation there and coming out with something that's pretty valuable to your business.
Thank you.
Matthew, for both of you, what was the current landscape like for, a guest wanting food at your brewery? Could they order it? Were there food trucks? Order from neighbors? What was that like before you decided to open up your kitchen?
Yeah, so for us out on St. Pete Beach, there are already, four or five, different food establishments, all like literally across the street from us, next door to us. We had their menus inside the tasting room, as well as, again, like other breweries in the local area, when we were able to get them, we would book in food trucks. And as Liz mentioned, we just kept finding that the natural progression was that the customers were really much more wanting, requesting, requiring, almost mandating, that they had something, and again, path of least resistance, that they could order right there on site when we were open. And really just trying to balance that consistency of constantly booking food trucks, worrying about basically, third-party interactions, customer service, quality of product, making sure that they don't leave early or that they don't arrive late. It just became too much of a struggle for us to maintain, again, good customer service to match along with our quality product and what we already had going on, without constantly be put on the blame for another business's interactions or, again, inconsistencies. Just like Liz said, the common phone calls of, do you have a food truck that's going to be there that day? If not, and it's like, okay, well, what day is it going to be there? So, I would like to say that magically, having a food truck or even having the kitchen available, you would think, oh, we finally have, this food available. We finally have, this option available that everybody seems to be deeming to want so bad. That means listen, test, but those individuals who seem like they wanted to have dinner there every night, they come in and still have food. So it's like I wanted to know the option.
Matthew, your audio's a little in and out at the moment. It was a little in and out, but It's tough to find a good partner, whether a food truck or a partner in anything else. And more importantly, as you alluded to, the consumers, they want consistency. They don't want to, know that some Fridays you have a food truck. They want to know if they're going out on a Friday night that Mastery's is going to have that food truck available, rather than show up ready for beer and whatever the food truck may serve and get told that they decided not to come today. So it's tough to find a really good partner. Is that, an experience you can vouch for? Well, Brian, how about yourself?
Yes,
I think Matthew's
I
having
absolutely
a little
100% agree.
Yeah, awesome. Now, Brian, how about you? What were the options like for guests coming to visit your tap room? You had mentioned that you were primarily production. Did you even have a tap room early on?
Yeah, we had kind of the industrial warehouse tasting room model, but really it wasn't until like the last 2 to 3 years that the food truck scene in our area kind of took off. So it was really tricky the first few years, even trying to get a food truck to come out. And given that we're in an industrial space, there's like some fast food options nearby, but our tasting room clientele pretty quickly knew that like if they wanted to eat, they were going to be bringing their own food in, or kind of the same thing too, where you just have all of the people that are able to deliver to the tasting room. You have their flyers out for customers to take a look at. So honestly, when we made the decision to open up our own pizza kitchen on site, we were definitely dealing with like a captive audience, not a whole lot of direct competition, at least within a couple of miles of our tasting room.
Now, what was the moment you decided? I know you said it potentially was COVID related, but when did you actually start adding that kitchen seriously and really buckle down on the planning?
So it had to have been May of last year, and that was kind of the peak of LA County really digging their heels in and saying, unless you have a bona fide kitchen, you are not reopening. They were not budging on the food truck partnership idea. They were not budging on partying with a third party caterer. So, we were looking at some of our neighbors in the county who fortunately did have their own on-site kitchens, and they were conducting outdoor, service. And all of us other brewers were just kind of sitting there being glorified, craft beer liquor stores, basically. And there was talking to our county supervisors and anybody that would listen to us. It was a really, really bleak scenario. And so it was kind of a sink or swim at that point.
How quickly from having the idea, realizing you needed this in May, I mean, I guess you got it open fairly recently, so almost a year-long process?
Yeah, I mean, all in all, it was probably about 7 to 8 months, because we teamed up with an architect, and fortunately for us, we're in a 5,000 square foot, warehouse, and we had a really big office that was nearly 1,000 square feet, and we basically just gutted that office and turned it into our kitchen. But at that point, the city and the county worked with us really well, because obviously they understood the situation that we were in. So there wasn't a whole lot of red tape. I imagine it would have been a much more arduous process had we done this pre-COVID. And then also some loans out there too. And we were able to get an extension on our SBA loan. So it was a scary proposition, but probably would have been much more scary if we were trying to do this back in 2019.
No, I totally understand that. And Matthew, you opened up your kitchen prior to COVID. Is that correct?
Yes, correct. So we actually launched our kitchen in January of 2019. At the time, because we were slowly transitioning into the food operations and figuring out what that meant, we used to only operate it Thursday through Sunday. Again, trying to hit those high peak hours where we thought would be the highest profitability and best make sense at that point in time.
What even made you want to open that kitchen? Because you started without, you opened it pre-pandemic. What was the moment that you said, you know what, we really need to do this?
Overall, it was just the inconsistency of being able to, whether it be getting food trucks, work with catering companies, inconsistency of level of quality of product coming from neighboring restaurants, and seeing that constant demand of customers calling in, asking if we're going to have a food truck, if we had our own on-site kitchen. And, again, being a Florida boy and having some majority of, again, my experience of craft beer still being in Florida at that point in time, I just didn't even realize how much of a common thing, having an on-site kitchen for a brewery was, as it was up north, Midwest, and other states. So, it really quickly became a lesson, to me, that this was something that Florida really needed to get on board with, especially if you're wearing a giant full-scale size production brewery that was, looking to send 20 plus 30,000 barrels of beer throughout the entire state of Florida, and that's where you were really able to make your money. But if you were going to be a local neighborhood brewery that was going to do under 1,000 barrels a year, having that added value of food was hugely needed to support the longevity of your business.
Awesome. I'm glad it's working out for you. And you obviously solved that problem of inconsistencies you were facing. Now, Liz, it sounded like you had a different problem. You had a consistent neighbor who could provide a quality food to your product. One word I'm interested in talking to you about is competition. How did your neighbors feel when they heard you were adding an all-out kitchen?
Oh, our neighbors were very supportive. They knew that it was driven out of need. And then obviously once we decided to keep the kitchen, once all the, mandates got lifted and everything, it was very supportive. And we don't pretend to, act like we're a competition to a sit-down restaurant in the plaza that can offer a full menu. We have a very small scale pub menu, and it's mostly just apps and bites and quick eats. So there's no real competition where that's concerned. And at the same time, we also still do partner with either the adjacent restaurants. As a matter of fact, we're going to be doing our Cinco de Mayo. We're going to be teaming up with the Mexican place next door again, and we're going to be shutting down the kitchen for a day and working with them for that event. And then we still do, beer pairing dinners where we bring in outside caterers and things like that. So there's no real competition, and everybody's been very supportive of it.
Fantastic. Now, how big is your kitchen? What's the setup like?
It's very small. It was our event room. So we used to have a small event room where you could have a private party before. It was about 14 by 16 feet. So that space was planned on being a kitchen at some point in the future. Like I said, we equipped it with some electrical components beforehand. We had a hand sink already in there and things like that. So when it came time to convert it to the little kitchen that we have now, it was pretty easy to kind of jump right in. We started our kitchen with nothing more than a steam table and a microwave. And that steam table allowed us to do gourmet hot dogs. And I had local chefs bring in toppings like chili and caramelized onions and things like that. So we could do kind of like upscale hot dog, if there is such a term. And that's what allowed us to get back open. But the whole point of buying that first piece of equipment, that steam table, was because we knew at some point we would want to do things like dips and beer cheeses and things like that. So we opted to go that route first.
And about how many items do you have on the menu currently?
Currently, I would say, I think like 12 to 15 items. They're all very strategically placed. They have very, we want to make sure that we have something that's a little bit on the healthier side. We have, you can't have a pub without pretzels and beer cheese, but we have a couple gourmet flatbreads, and then like the toppings from those flatbreads we use in some of the other items. So a lot of our items cross ingredients well. So that way, I think we only have like 29 total ingredients that we work with. And that allows us to keep, profits as high as they can be, losses as low as they can be, while still offering a pretty decent variety.
No, that's fantastic. Now, Brian, I know you've mentioned pizza quite a few times. Is it strictly pizza, or do you have any other items on the menu?
It is pizza, and then we also have a charcuterie box. So very limited menu, only 6 types of pizzas, at least for right now, all 12-inch, so there's no additional sizes. And then the plan for the charcuterie box is basically like a monthly rotating selection of cheeses and meats and like house pickled items.
I know every time anyone, my family included, goes to a pizza place, you look at a massive menu of toppings. Do your guests routinely ask you for more outside of your 6 options?
A little bit, but also I think a lot of our guests are kind of used to, you get what you get when you come in kind of a thing. And we also are still allowing and encouraging people to bring outside food in. So we do have, some vegan options and vegetarian options, but it's like, hey, we're not trying to be all things for all people. If you don't like the pizza or you aren't happy with, us not having ranch, for instance, it's like you can bring in Domino's if you'd like, or, bring in your own ranch.
Has that happened yet?
Yeah, we've been getting a lot of ranch questions.
Any Domino's?
Not that I've seen.
That's a good thing, at least. At least they're enjoying your pizza. Yeah. Now, Matthew, how about you? What do you serve in your kitchen?
Yeah, so again, we've had a little bit longer time period, than Liz and Brian have to really dive in a little bit further on the food side. So right now, we're actually sitting a little over 30 item menu. We have a bit of a Cuban, Puerto Rican flair in our fusion style food. So we have tostones served with pulled pork. We have skirt steak sliders. We have fish tacos. We have wings. Things with tacos. I can tell you, like, again, being Tuesday, tacos are life. Taco Tuesday is a thing that people absolutely love. I know I loved it before it was a thing with us. So again, just opening up a whole nother way to advertise, promote, and draw people in, using the food. But yeah, so quesadillas, different salads, we make our own beer cheese, queso, guac, and different things for doing a chips and dip type serving. Anybody wants to check it out, you can hop online really easy. We actually run a separate social media page just for the kitchen, and it's called The Kitchen at Masteries Brewing Co. And again, just kind of running almost 2 different lives of what we have going on beer world, and then what we have going on kitchen world. That way, again, touching base a little bit on 2 different audience. You have that audience that loves to have beer and something to munch on, and then you have that audience that loves food and then wants to know what beer to pair with it. So we kind of get to talk to 2 different people and really kind of double up on our marketing attributes.
And Matthew, I want to talk about staffing for a minute, because you have over 30 items on your menu. I can imagine your servers, your bartenders, they're not the ones producing and getting involved in the food process. Do you have essentially a kitchen manager, or what's the staff like for your operation, both beer side and the kitchen side?
So for us currently at the moment, we have a full-time operator who's pretty much in charge, and that works directly with me on what the menu is and what events we have coming up and so on. But in the past, we've done everything from when we first started out. It was me solely in charge of it, operating it and getting assistance. We've worked with other partners to bring in to almost subcontract it out. There's quite a different ways to really look at how to make that all best make sense. And again, it's all going to be dependent on what the overall goals are for the business and organization. So when we get a little bit further down the line talking about some of the different ways to tackle staffing it, finding those again people to operate it, come up with menus and so on, advertise it, market it, some good ways to do it, whether you want to take over and do it yourself or find good partners to help you do that.
And Matthew, you had mentioned you have an operator run your kitchen. Does that mean it's a separate company, or is it part of Masteries?
So I have a parent company which is the Masteries Brewing Co. LLC, which is the head asset on it. And then we also have Masteries Restaurant LLC, which is a sub company of Masteries Brewing Co. All operating underneath a different DBAs that line the 2 together. And essentially, though, then again, the way we had it lined up, and this will kind of touch back on what Liz was saying earlier on with the state of Florida and an organization having to have its own licensed under the 500 section of the Department of Business and Professional Regulations. They were linked together. So, I mean, we were able to operate having both the food and alcohol licenses. But again, as a business standpoint, looking at liability and even all for the overall structure of how we do out here on St. Pete Beach, for us, it was more of a path of least resistance to getting open faster. So, yeah.
No, that all makes sense. Now, Liz and Brian, because you have a smaller food operation, is it fair to assume that your beer staff, the ones working the brewery, are also doing the food prep and things related to the kitchen?
So when we first started offering food service, we were doing that. And we quickly realized that that just was not sustainable. It was not a good way to be able to keep the customer service up, the expectations, the timeliness, and things like that. So it was pretty early on where we decided we were going to have kitchen staff. Now, luckily, because our menu offering is very limited, we actually only have one person who is in the kitchen on any given day. And so they come in, we open at 3 in the afternoon. So they come in an hour after. So they come in at 4. And then we close the kitchen down about an hour before the tap room closes. And then that kitchen person handles, putting things away, closing it down, labeling, properly packaging things back up. And then I usually try to go in daily and set the kitchen up. If not, my bar staff does know how to prepare everything. They know how to set everything up, and they do know how to tear it down. We just try to work it in a way where they don't have to do that, let alone every day. Sometimes when we have larger events, we might have 2 kitchen staff either working in tandem or overlapping as far as their hours. But for the most part, our kitchen can operate with just one person.
That's fantastic. Was it tough to find a dedicated kitchen person who knew what they were doing?
We actually have 3 people that do part-time. So it actually just worked out well because we didn't want to be in a position where this one dedicated person couldn't make it, one weekend they're out of town or something like that. So this is a great job for college kids and things like that. So we were able to kind of get a couple people who just needed this for like a day or 2 a week and kind of work it that way. So that way I always have someone available to work a shift.
And have you had a day happen yet where someone called out, you had to throw a bartender back there?
Not in the kitchen. I've had to do that on the bar side, but not in the kitchen, luckily. So I think we plan out pretty far in advance. And, whenever people want time off, we're really good about being able to fit that into the schedule. So we've never really had an issue. Most things are planned in advance. But I'm pretty much the backup person. So if we get a call out, it's usually going to be me working either the bar or the kitchen.
I'm sure that you're the backup person of wearing so many different hats.
Yeah.
Yeah. Brian, how about you? You're serving some pizzas and some charcuterie. Is it something handled by your taproom staff, or do you have people specific to the kitchen processes?
We have people specific to the kitchen process. When I mentioned we hired 16 people, and so basically there's like a separate pizza order counter, and then about 100 feet away is where our beer ordering counter is. So we have designated beer servers, and then we have designated pizza cashier employees. And then at any given time, we have 3 to 4 people inside of the kitchen. It's pretty hands-on in there. We're making everything from scratch. So we have people coming in the morning to make dough, and then we're making, sauce and prepping all the toppings and stuff like that. So, just from day one, we made the decision just to completely separate the two, even though they're under the same building, and everyone's getting their checks from the same payroll.
On a scale of 1 to 10, how much has your pizza intake gone up since May?
1,000%.
Now, Liz, you got something to add?
I was going to say that R&D is pretty intense.
Well, just like the beer side too, of course.
That's right, of course.
But I mean, that's one thing I've always told brewery owners. When you have a brewery, that's one business, and you launch the kitchen side, it's absolutely running a second business. You better be prepared. And Matthew, you even have it under as a separate DBA. So I think it really is acknowledged. If you're considering launching a kitchen, put the work in to do it right. It's running a separate business.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's really, you think about it, you hire a brew team and a head brewer and you got your marketing all set up around, beer, and that's what you feel really comfortable doing. My best recommendation is if you're looking to get into food, put that same thought process into the food side, because again, it's your brand, it's your reputation. Even if it's a small item, whatever you do, make sure it still matches the quality of what people have come to know with your brand and business practices. Otherwise, really, you're taking the left hand, which is just going to shoot the right hand and bring the right hand down. So if you don't feel like you can find the right people, get the right skills, right tool set, execute it in a way that'll match your current line of work, you're not ready.
That's good insight, Matthew. And Brian, I have a question for you because you just opened your pizza kitchen. Talk a little bit about some of the challenges you faced those first few weeks of just getting it open.
Honestly, probably the biggest challenge was just having no idea what the turnout was going to be. And so we were to do initial training, we had to have some kind of soft service, but our tasting room is open 7 days a week with pretty broad hours. So, and like I said, the pizza kitchen ordering counter is right inside of our building. So there wasn't really a way I didn't want to shut down my tasting room in order just to conduct soft service. So we actually did kind of these like early brunch sessions. And, that kind of gave us a chance to like see how the line works. And some of our employees, this is their first job. And our kitchen managers are having to show them, everything, how to chop an onion and such. So then finally we just had to go for it. And so that first weekend that we decided to open, we ran out of food by like 7 p.m. each night, which is obviously a great problem to have. And so now we're kind of sitting here scratching our heads because we're like, wow, this kitchen that we thought was oversized is actually too small. So we're looking at, some outdoor refrigeration solutions right now and stuff like that. But just again, had we done this from day one, we would not have been selling out a pizza on our first opening weekend. But again, just getting the trust of our community for the last 9 years really made this a easier transition, and we've kind of earned people's benefit of the doubt. And so maybe they don't like a certain type of pizza, but they're like, if Bravery's gonna make it, I'll give it a shot.
There's definitely a lot of trust there. I think that's awesome what you've done. It's great. It's fun to hear your excitement about adding something new to your business after nearly a decade, because it probably revitalizes it a little bit. It gives you a little bit more excitement about the operation because it's something new. And as entrepreneurs, we like a challenge. And I would imagine you see that kitchen as a challenge.
Absolutely. It's been a blast.
Awesome. Hope to try that pizza someday. And yeah. Liz, how about you? What are some of the challenges you faced over the past year, going from, the steam table to the current operation you have now?
So I think definitely trying to figure out what our average consumption of menu items was going to be, trying to make sure that we weren't, purchasing too much and then having too much loss at the end of a week was really important. There are also a lot of, there's health codes and all these this entire new learning curve where that was concerned, and trying to figure out how that applies to us. And so I've had to lean on a lot of great friends I have in the industry. I'm lucky enough to know a couple other breweries that have kitchens themselves, other small restaurant owners, caterers, and things like that. So I was able to lean on them for a lot of this assistance, but really dialing in food costs, profitability, how to, track and, lessen your losses, were all areas that I had to analyze it. And so all I did in that aspect, besides, leaning on those resources, was using my, I've got a big, finance and banking background. And so I was able to really just look at everything in a very financial sense and drill it down. And you take this pizza apart, for example, and you've got your crust, and then you've got your toppings, and then you're going to have loss and things like that, and percentages and calculating all that. So it's just that it just took a lot of time. So at first we didn't really worry about profitability. We were just kind of going, okay, we've got the food out there, as we were focused mostly on the customer service aspect, the timing, making sure that we had the equipment to be able to get food out quickly and consistently. And then from there, then I started drilling down the profitability aspect and trying to reduce costs and increase profits where I could.
And Liz, that's a fantastic point because so many people think of adding the kitchen as the actual operation of the kitchen and getting the food out, but you mentioned all the finances behind it. Besides, breaking down the product cost for anything, are there any lessons you've learned or advice you would like to give to anyone considering, opening a kitchen from the financial perspective?
From the financial perspective, I would start with, with the planning, making sure that you do have an adequate enough kitchen, because I found like we started off with a smaller toaster that we were going to do these flatbreads in. And I quickly learned that that was not efficient as far as time goes, even though it was the more affordable option. So we had to then upgrade our equipment along the way. And so then we got a legitimate pizza oven at that point. So those were areas where I could have avoided had I just, instead of just trying to think small, I was really trying to get, I wanted to get what was right for the space. And so I would probably say really don't sell yourself short when you're trying to add this food component in. Really get the equipment, the proper equipment that you're going to need to be able to maintain it. You're going to need a lot more freezer space and cooler space than you think you do. We have a great walk-in cooler that we use obviously for our kegs and our taps, but when you look at where our kitchen's located and having to run all the way around the building to get into the walk-in cooler to get some more mozzarella just doesn't make sense. So really kind of thinking through that process and spending the dollars up front, saves you from having to spend a whole lot more later. So that was probably one of my bigger takeaways.
Great feedback there. Now, did any of you talk to any sort of like restaurant consultants? I mean, obviously you spoke with your friends, but did anybody bring in a professional to help with the planning of the kitchen layout and other recipes or anything else related to the kitchen process?
I'll just say, no, we didn't go with a direct consultant, but again, selling beer to all the different bars and restaurants in our community, we've developed a lot of professional relationships with these people and got a lot of help just having some various restaurant owners come in and kind of show them the initial layout of what we were thinking. It's like, does this make sense? Does this not make sense? So a lot of help came from there. And, for us, the initial scariest part was our final health department walkthrough. But because we had so many different eyes from so many perspectives kind of helping us, really mitigated any problems that we had with that part of opening.
No, I'm glad it went well. Was there any issues at all that happened that your health department walked through or anything that you learned from the health department?
No. And I mean, we were in a good spot where all of the equipment in there was new. So obviously, making sure that all your refrigeration is holding temp. But just like really small stuff, like we missed a splash guard on our hand wash sink. And, an interesting thing with COVID right now too is like, well, just install that splash guard and take a picture and send it to me and I'll give you guys approval. It was probably a lot easier than it is for most people to get a kitchen up and running.
So your advice would be anyone considering a kitchen, don't wait 2 years from now, do it right now?
Yeah, I would definitely, if you have the capital means to do it, it's making a lot of sense for us already just after a few weeks. And I know we all have different state laws as far as alcohol goes, but that allowed us to bring in wine and hard cider into our tasting room, which is great to now have, gluten-free options, or just for people that have a significant other that doesn't enjoy drinking beer. Now I have that added demographic coming into my tasting room. But again, yeah, breweries are all about community and, establishing roots in your town. And it's like, take advantage of that. And like I said, reach out to the restaurants that you've been selling beer to all these years. And most of them are going to be really happy to help and share their, breadth of knowledge with you.
No, I love everything you just said, Brian. Now, Matthew, on to you, because you have had the kitchen a little bit longer. Are there any big challenges that you've had to overcome since you've added the kitchen?
Yeah, so, I will definitely say that there's just like whether you add any component to a new business, there's always new challenges. So for us, our kitchen, because we didn't have the physical space on the property, again, it just wasn't considered, early on. We went ahead and bought a 30-foot long food truck and have utilized that. So it's permanently fixed food truck, and again, kind of helps work as far as marketing and imagery, since people are so used to seeing that food truck concept. But it's actually helped us in a lot of different ways of being a food truck. One, food trucks are differently regulated, and again, another important part of running that two separate LLCs is, we have our main license, for the brewing operations with the building, with the brewery, and then we have our food operations with the food truck. And Florida's weird, and Liz can probably talk about, piggyback on this a little bit too, and of saying that, like, we have the health department and we have the Department of Health here in Florida. One's run under the hotels and restaurants and food and beverage, and the other one's through the Department of Agriculture. So right now, I actually, so when we get our inspections, I get two different inspections, but one sticks pretty much straight to the food truck, and the other one stays strictly just towards the brewing operations. And what they're looking for are totally different, components. But again, with that being a fixed food truck, I mean, we used to run it on propane, and we had natural gas here at the building, and so we went ahead and made that conversion over and updated all the equipment on the food truck to natural gas, and now have a hard line, run underground to the truck. So it can't move. Even we have power going to it. We have a hard line of water. So really, then, other than the outside skin of it being a truck, and if we wanted to unplug everything and move it because of natural disasters coming our way, hurricane, storm, you name it, pretty easy to do. But other than that, it also gives us opportunity to have a giant, 30 by 12 billboard out in front of our building as well, which, again, because of local ordinances, we would not be able to have that big of signage out front of our building. And, but there's no governances around food trucks and signage in our municipality. So really, it kind of became a unique win and an opportunity for us to be able to work more in a gray, flexible area and not be so tied to just what building and zoning department would require. Had we put in an actual kitchen, we also actually would have been required to increase our parking footprint. So when they calculate the amount of spaces in the business model, we would have actually been required to go back for an additional variance because we wouldn't have been able to have the additional parking. Because it's technically a food truck, even though it's permanently mounted here, it falls in that magical different box that allows us to go keep doing what we're doing without looking at additional parking. And since this has been in place for over 2 years, gone through COVID, I can tell you, we're working a lot with the local municipalities. They've actually used us as a prime example of a case study showing the evolution of increased using outdoor space, autonomous, vehicles becoming more of the idea of the future, how they're recalculating traffic counts for parking on buildings, because again, more people are using Uber, Lyft, public transportation systems, bicycles, now electric scooters. So like I said, we've been able to be very innovative with our go-to process, and while still working within the local municipality's requirements. So yeah.
Awesome. Thanks for sharing that, Matthew. And Liz, you have something to add?
Yeah, I was going to say, we've talked a lot about, some of the challenges that we've all faced, but one of the benefits that I didn't even, realize until we did get the food license was, food pairing events and beer pairing dinners and things like that were always things that were popular at our venue prior to COVID and going into COVID. And so now that we have that food license, it really kind of allows us to get a little more creative and have a lot more fun with it. So even though we have a very small scaled back menu offering of select pub items, we do take advantage of the license by having monthly beer pairing dinners. We've done a seafood boil. I have a chef that comes in, and we're doing a surf and turf dinner in 2 weeks. And so we've really learned to be able to kind of capitalize on that as well, to allow us to do those added things. And that kind of also helps break the monotony of just having this standard menu all the time as well.
I love the creativity you're putting into the kitchen. Now, everyone, as we close down the hour, I want to talk a little bit more about the positives. So, Liz, thanks for throwing that in there. That was a great insight. One thing I want to ask, one of the benefits that you've seen, are you seeing your guests' overall tabs higher? Are you seeing guests staying longer? What other metrics that you're monitoring have you seen improve since you've added food? And if you don't have the actual metrics, I would love any insight you could give.
Yeah, I'll jump right in. We've noticed, obviously average tabs have gone up. Overall, obviously that also means my servers and my bartenders have been getting more tips, which makes them happy as well. I will say that they've been staying a bit longer as well. And so we're having a little lower turnover in tables and things like that. But overall, I think just people have just really kind of enjoyed the venue more when you have, even when we had the partnership and you had, food that was being served to you in to-go containers. There's something about having that dish in front of you, and you've got your pint glass, and now you've got this meal. It's really just giving that added value to your enjoyment of the space, and obviously that's worked out really well for us.
Very exciting. Thanks for hanging out with us today. And Brian, how about you? I know it's been early, but any observations so far about the benefits of adding that kitchen, besides people actually buying your pizza?
Yeah, I mean, it is kind of hard to take into account, how much of this is just, it's brand new, and so it's exciting and everyone wants to check out the new spot. But I'm very certain that it is going to lead to people spending more time there. So like Liz is saying, you're drinking more beer, but then also, we would always see either people coming in before dinner to get a round of beers and then leaving to go eat somewhere else, or maybe people coming in after dinner to have, a nightcap or two. So I'm excited to be people's like actual plan for the evening, as opposed to the, pregame or afterthought kind of thing. But something else, and again, I don't know how things are in Florida for you guys, but, in California, when we're doing some kind of fundraiser or trying to raise funds for a nonprofit, we can't directly say, oh, $1 from each glass of beer is going to go to this charity. But now that we have a food component, I'm really excited to be able to say, hey, we've teamed up with such and such nonprofit for this month, and direct sales of the pizza are going to go to this organization. So again, for us, it's like, yes, we're all business owners and we're trying to make a profit, but it's more than that, especially in this industry. And I'm very excited to increase my ability to give back in bigger and broader ways now.
Brian, I love your outlook on life. That's great. I'm really excited for you to be able to do that now.
Thank you, Andrew.
Matthew, how about you? Your hair is blowing nicely in the wind right now. It looks fantastic. But, looking at, since you've added a kitchen, what are the benefits you've experienced?
So over the last couple of years, and again, really, the evolution of where we are today with the kitchen is totally different than day one. First it was, okay, we knew people wanted food. But then we just started diving more and more into the other possibilities. And let's remember, we're craft breweries, and again, can't talk to California the exact laws, but I know Liz knows that here in the state of Florida, as she mentioned, we have a 2 COP. Within that 2 COP, we're limited by the types of beverages we can serve. So really, as that, we got beer, we have wine and cider and hard seltzers, but we can't do spirits. But then to help better, before, the loss that we had is now those individuals who wanted food. So that was just one more component we were lacking from our business model to really well round out our overall customer experience, to give them a little bit of everything that they want while they're here. Now, of course, you can go ahead and, the added possibilities now that we have food operations is looking into licensing further under restaurants to fall, which would be called the CRX here in Florida. which if we can, show actual, the numbers, the 50%, food sales to, the other items, to match the alcohol, that opens up another possibility for those establishments looking to maybe add spirits to their program, for businesses. For us, we were able to pair with other professionals in the industry a lot easier. We have a food license out here. So again, talking about relationships, I knew a lot of head chefs out there at other restaurants that we would invite in, and we would have guest spotlights working with other head chefs that would come in almost like a catering company and do those beer type dinners. And again, marketing, working things like Taco Tuesdays, Wing Wednesdays, spotlighting, doing specials, a special dessert, something that we could pair with a beer. You got a big stout coming on and you want to do a key lime pie, maybe kind of do that tart to big, bold, chocolatey balance. We've been in food competitions, out here in the Tampa Bay Beaches area. They do what's called Taste of the Beaches every year. We actually won it last year by putting together what people consider the best taste, where we did a small flight of beer paired with some sliders and tacos for the guests who came in for that. And again, so the possibilities are just really endless, allowing you to have a more well-rounded experience, customer service, showing of another product, but again, it really comes back down to making sure you execute true to your brand, and pair well, training, getting everybody on board with the same training, just like you have your beer tender, so they understand, when they're selling food, what that food is, and, understanding people's different dietary needs, if they're vegan, if they're gluten-free, and again, even in the beer world, we're learning more and more about, the needs of that. So when a person comes in like, oh, I love sours, but I'm vegan. Can I have this sour? And you're like, oh, it has lactose in it. No, you cannot have that sour. But so again, it's just another education component. And those are wins, though. The more educated that you are, the more they can communicate to your customer base, the more that they feel comfortable and confident in what you are doing as a business, as their go-to local brewery. The bigger win that is for you, because they're going to tell their friends, they're going to share on social media, they're going to help pick up traction. And again, when we see these huge changes in tide constantly going on, especially in the hospitality market right now, it's that much more important to make sure that you have customer confidence. So like I said, it can be a win all the way around.
No, Matthew, you hit on so many of my buzzwords there, but it comes down to experience. Creating that perfect, safe, delicious experience that's representative of your brand is what we all desire to do. And I recently did a study about 10 days ago, and I've been asking, brewery goers over the course of the pandemic, what are their 3 most important aspects, of planning a brewery visit? Unfortunately, I can't say that food on the menu is in the top 3, but it's number 4. And 33% of those surveyed include that as one of the most important factors when planning a brewery visit. And that's a really large number to me. 1 out of 3 guests are looking for a food on your brewery's menu. So for anyone who's considering food, listen to the advice of Liz, Brian, and Matthew. You all have created successful businesses that now have food. So I'm excited for you. I'm excited to someday visit. And I really appreciate the 3 of you sharing your insight today. So hopefully we're sharing beers and food before too long. Bye, everybody. Talk to you soon.
Bye.
See you, Andrew. Have a good one.